I have to make a confession that I am a great admirer of Danish documentary, of the tradition of Danish documentary, and Jon for me is the greatest Danish documentary director living. I'm sorry to have to say that.
You've seen my film?
Yes. But now I wish you inspiration, joy, and food for thought with Jon and Matthias.
Yeah, welcome to our masterclass. Thank you very much for your visit here. I don't have much to add, we just go into it.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jon Bang Carlsen. I'm a 64-year-old Danish filmmaker, and you know, one of my something that I have had to acknowledge from the very beginning of my filmmaking days is that the shadow of the filmmaker is kind of falls very heavily on the subject matter, no matter how you are doing your films. Therefore, I think it's appropriate just to see where I come from, right? I'm kind of come from North Copenhagen, from a dropout family, from a rich background, from a kind of some people whom I love very much, but who had kind of killed all their gods before I arrived. So there were kind of no traditions, there were no gods, it was kind of a wild people from the 60s, right? Both of my parents were sculptors. I grew up in a home that was a wonderful home, but lacking, you know, kind of a wild place where you kind of didn't use traditions anymore, right? And that has been a very dominant trait in those films that I made. That I've been all my life looking for, you know, the possibility of some kind of religious belief and for traditions in my life. I haven't succeeded, but at least I've tried. I do fiction as well, and there I think it's much harder when you work with real actors, because they have this technique, right? So very often, maybe it's because I'm a lousy director, I don't know, but very often I've done scenes with guys in fiction films, and I've actually enjoyed what they did on the set. Then when I got back home in the editing table, suddenly, you know, it dawned on me that they have been, you know, they have lived and survived on that technique. Actually, they are empty. There's nothing behind the mask except whatever emptiness we share. And therefore, very often, you know, lying is more truthfully than actually telling the truth. I have this another smart-ass line saying that within documentary filmmaking, if you want to say that documentary film has anything to do with truth, then you have to define truth in a way that doesn't exclude lying, because very often you have to lie in order to get to the truth. Actually, when I was a young guy, I worked a lot on the North Sea as a fisherman, and when we young men, when we talk, you know, I was an outsider. I came from this kind of not very officially background, but the other young guys, right, when they talked about their women back in the harbor, right, the moment when they've been out there for a month, right, you know, of course, in order to in the beginning, I asked them, how is your wife? Oh, she's okay, she's probably watching the news now, or putting the kids to bed or something like that. Then after a month, you know, when they really started to miss this woman, right, they had to kind of put her in another surround. They had to make up a story to kind of put the emotional stuff into it, right? Which I think is the way we do. We always have to make stories in order to have something to have our life within.
It's hard to trace a story in Africa. The landscape is too big, and there's too much beautiful silence to share with strangers.
God is going to be, you know, it takes us one by one, eh?
I have a lot of problems, which are, because of course I finance my movies like everybody finances their movies. We all become more and more dependent on TV stations. Of course, TV stations, they still have a very, very, in my eyes, simplistic definition about what reality is. Now, of course, we're not talking about war situation, we're not talking about journalistic situation, we're talking about describing the life we live. And TV people, you know, often has this kind of very kind of a rigorous idea about that the camera actually is able, if you open a camera, it actually sees the truth, which for me is a lot of baloney. I have another line saying that reality is always wearing a mask. You have to somehow trick yourself behind the mask in order to get to the very core of that life you want to portray. Of course, this is my way, and that's I don't probably. I've actually seen some films here. You know, I'm in the jury here as well. I've seen some films people who have another talent who can use you know, ordinary documentary filmmaking in a very beautiful way. But it's not my way. I have to. Also, because I think that for me the best films I've made have always been kind of. The reason I started doing movies is that I love to frame. I love framing, there's no reason for me to run out with a camera where I cannot control the visuals 100%. I have to be able to control the visuals in order to express myself, because that's if I have a talent, it's probably around that framing thing. My main talent is also because this whole illusion that we can actually film anything, you know, profoundly is a piece of bullshit, because everything changes all the time, and the camera can only record die Vergangenheit, what happens. It cannot. It's always too late. You know, it's always changing in front of the camera. So I feel very much that of course now I'm not talking about journalism. I'm talking about documentary, or using pieces of fragments of reality to as a narrative art form, right?
Did you write the scene, or did you experience the scene before and then you decided to take it into the movie?
Now you put your finger right on the place where actually this is a real documentary movie, because when I did my, I went back to Copenhagen and made my storyboard, and then I decided, this thing about every year she took that, she loved the painting. She took it down, dusted it off, so the ocean was fresh and nice again, put it back up on the rusty nail. And so I wanted to do that scene, so I wanted first to do that, and then I wanted to cut close to the reflection of her face in the glass, and I see the curtain behind, and I hear the door and the wind, and this curtain goes out, and I defocus to the curtain, then I cut to the curtain, and I see the door. All those cuts I knew beforehand, right? So without telling the lady, I asked some crew member to go down and put a piece of glass in, right? So when we were going to do the scene, this old woman comes up, and as all we old elderly people, she's afraid of losing her strength, right? So she come up there, here's the painting she has been able to put up on that fucking wall like for 40 years. Suddenly she takes it, and oh my God! And therefore, she doesn't want to admit it, right? But the whole crew, all those humanistic film crews, they were whispering behind my back, cut it down, close it, say thank you or something like that. But the wise man, he knew that this woman, if I stopped that recording, right, she would be defeated, right? She should fight against this too heavy painting, right? And she succeeds in the end.
So did it ever occur to you to concentrate on what you call to make a traditional documentary about Jimmy as your main character looking for a woman in real life? Did this ever?
No, because I cannot work that way, because I cannot when I do my research things I can. But this thing about running after Jimmy, I'm actually enormously impressed by people who can do it, and I've seen some brilliant examples here, right? People who can just follow life and actually somehow, I don't know how to do it, get those beautiful shots, without interfering. I cannot do it, and I actually don't want to do it. I like the mutual, I like this thing that we are playing around, like both of the two films we have seen. It is like playgrounds. It's some guys in front of the camera, some guys behind the camera, and we have a mutual task trying to investigate the life that we live on that spot on Earth, right?
Will you count while I die?
In my old days, I want to get back. I want to mature. My maturing would be to actually be able to make the banal fictional, narrative. I would love to get back to. I started off with Dickens. I loved as a child. I loved Dickens. I read all Dickens novels. I loved David Copperfield, all of them, I would love to come back to be something that I never succeeded, and to stop playing around with verfremdung and all this thing about deconstructing my stories, having to deconstruct in order to feel that I'm honest about my subject matter and about my doubt about how to express my subject matter. I would love to be, to actually be able to just tell a story, right? and believing that I'm actually doing the right thing.
Without deconstruction.
Yeah, without deconstruction, without actually misbelieving my actors, misbelieving. But of course, my big problem, of course, is always that in all of my films, most of my films, I tried, which has been very important for me, is trying to incorporate doubts into the structure of the movies.
He had lost her beautiful eyes, and now he couldn't even prove that he belonged to her world anymore.
I play tennis, you know. The moment I think about when I to hit the ball, I lose the ball. It's just exactly the same thing about, for me, doing stories, doing films, is that you have to, the stuff that happens before your brain kicks in, you know, that stuff that comes to you instinctively, always have force to it. It can surprise yourself. It takes you down into new roads, you know, into new territories. The moment you put on the brain, right, you go back to the conservative stuff, right?
How did you put together the film Purity? What's it called?
Purity beats everything.
Beats everything. Like saying what you just said. Like.
Oh, this you're talking about the Germans, the Danish, this thing about. Have you seen Purity
The
beats
one
everything?
that we saw this morning. Yeah.
Oh, you saw it this morning. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
How I got the.
Yeah, like how does it? Do all these different elements come together? Like,
Yeah, but
how
that was.
much do you know before, and how much is it a process, and how does the process evolve?
Yeah, but actually that was a movie, you know, that's again, that I was sitting in a coffee shop in Cape Town, my favorite coffee shop, which happened to be a Jewish coffee shop. I was looking out and, you know, it's a place called Sea Point in Cape Town, which is an old upper class area which is falling apart because all the young Jewish kids, they cannot get jobs there anymore because the black people get jobs, which of course is trying to equalize the society. But they all go out, the ambitious young people, so the old Jewish people are left there, right? And they probably live in their big apartment somewhere there, right? And then they have some big grocer maids who take care of them, right? Those grocer maids have another story because, I didn't pick, I'm a wimp, I don't take up a hitchhiker in South Africa because it's too risky, but I take up, I had a big Land Rover, but I always took up all the maids because they had, you know, they're really lousy paid, so they had to hitchhike to go back and forth from the township out to white suburbia, right? So I picked them up, so I often had like 8 mates in my Land Rover, right? And we had big political discussions, and that is, of course, that we operate with much bigger budgets, right? So when I write the script myself, there's always this case, you know, you always, when they do the budget, you know, you always don't have the money, so you have to take out some of the scenes, right? And you have this, you go to the classic meetings we all go to, you know, and you have to intellectually give a reason for why this thing is necessary, why this shot is necessary, why it's, and of course, you know, there are always those scenes that don't have an obvious narrative function, right? But you just feel they maybe have a more poetic dimension to them or something like that. And they're always the scenes that are sold, that you take out of the script, right? And whenever I experience that, when I sit in the editing room, I suddenly realize that scene was actually the one that was the roots underneath the flower, right? The invisible thing that actually gave the nourishment and the kind of the ability to breathe to the rest of the visible structure, right? So that's another reason that I'm so fond of doing those low budget movies, because I have a freedom that I don't have, of course, with bigger budgets. Yes, thank you very much for listening to an old guy's memories.
Jon, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.